Hello everyone and welcome to the 22nd episode of Viral Banter. Today we are joined by four amazing guests once again, all members of the Generation Liberty team. So let's begin with a familiar face, our campus coordinator at Macquarie University, Anjali.
Hi Renee, how are you?
I am very well, thank you, Anjali. And now our representative at Australia's National University, another familiar face on the show and always makes wonderful contributions. Please welcome Connor.
Hello, very good to be here.
Thank you for being on the show again, Connor. And he is way up north, but still can't come to New South Wales for some reason, even though there's very few cases. But please welcome Mitchell from up in Queensland.
Hi, Renee. It's fantastic to be back.
Thanks for being on the show again. And coming to us all the way from Vietnam, he is a campus representative for the University of RMIT, but right now he is on exchange in Vietnam. Please welcome Boris to the show.
Hey, Renee. Good to be on the show.
And so today we have a lot of things to talk about, but first off, I thought we would talk about the confirmation hearings of Judge Amy Barrett. So we've seen these hearings this week, and they have, in a word I would say, being slightly bizarre, because the Democrats have been talking about, the over-politicization of the court by the Republicans. However, their line of questioning did not actually follow any questions that I believe are relevant to someone entering the Supreme Court as a judge. As a Supreme Court judge, your only job is to see whether laws are constitutional. You do not make laws, as you are not elected. However, the first part of the confirmation hearing seemed to focus completely on Obamacare. But the only relevant question, which is the only question they did not ask, was, is Obamacare constitutional? So it was a very strange series of confirmation questions right now. But also, one of the things they focused on a lot was Judge Amy Barrett's faith as a Catholic. Now, Connor, America has a little bit of a record here with anti-Catholic rhetoric. You can see this in when Kennedy ran as president. And they were saying that he would be a president for the Pope and not a president for America. And we saw kind of echoes of that today, where at these hearings, where Judge Amy Barrett was asked whether she would be a Catholic judge as opposed to an American judge. What are your thoughts on this really strange echoing of the past and anti-Catholic rhetoric during this hearing?
Yeah, look, unfortunately, I don't think this line of questioning is ever going to go away. And I think it will always be the case that people who have faith will be persecuted for it. I think we can go further back than Kennedy and Eisenhower. We can even look back at one of my political heroes, William Wilberforce, who played a really critical role, or spearheaded the campaign for the abolition of the African slave trade in the United Kingdom. He was an evangelical Christian, and even back 200 years ago, he was attacked for his faith then too, yet he persisted, and from his faith, he was able to progress an evidently exceptionally good cause. And I'm sure Amy Coney Barrett, as a practicing Catholic, knows this and is used to it as well. I mean, it's one of the eight Beatitudes is, blessed are those who are persecuted. Realistically, I just find it quite funny that there are so many people who are threatened by something that they don't even really believe in. It's that atheistic paradox of, I don't believe in God, yet I hate him. But anyway, I think that Amy Coney Barrett really meets every test that any reasonable person may impose in terms of qualifications, disposition, and character. And to paraphrase Senator Lindsey Graham's closing statement, I really hope that Barrett can adhere to her faith and still be considered by the vast majority of her fellow Americans to be someone who was well and truly worthy of the job.
Yeah, I think you make some good points there. And I think there's also a possibility that this could harshly backlash on the Democrats, because the American people are watching, and the American people are still vastly a majority of people of faith, and being consistently attacked on that basis, I think could really, smack them back in the face and have people of faith coming out to vote for the other side purely on that alone. But Mitchell, Amy Barrett has said, I will apply the law, I will follow the law, you make the policy. So she clearly does not condone judicial activism, as no Supreme Court judge could. But we often hear a critique from the left promoting judicial activism. However, a senator said to the Justice Barrett, you will have an important vote when it comes to issues such as Roe v. Wade. Do you agree with Justice Barrett's approach, or do you think that she should, in as much as, Justice Ginsburg's did for her own views, promote and vote for laws she believes are morally good for the country?
Yeah, I mean, look, Judge Barrett's on the record as a Scalia-esque originalist. I mean, that's an emphasis on original meaning, not original intent so much when it comes to constitutional interpretation, and then a more explicit blend of textualism when it comes to interpreting statute. And I think I broadly agree with her on that. And to the extent of any disparity that I would have with her, it's not even in the same ballpark as Ginsburg's, living tree activist approach, which really is little more than arriving at a desired moral or political conclusion and working backwards to justify it legally. I mean, going back to something that you and Connor were talking about in terms of this confirmation hearing being a bit feisty, Justice Barrett elicited a rare compliment from Senator Feinstein with regard to her position on severability. That is, where parts of legislation are unconstitutional, and to what extent should those provisions be severed and the rest left, or should the whole statute then be struck down? And I actually thought that was a nice departure from the tone of some previous confirmation hearings recently, notwithstanding the fact that they have really focused on their political objectives in asking her questions and not what her view as a judge is.
Yeah, I think you make some really important points there. Boris, you've got to have been following this along with everyone else. What has been your overall feeling of the confirmation process and the questioning line of the Democratic Party when it comes to Judge Amy Barrett? Amy Barrett.
Right. Well, look, obviously the Democrats' current approach is to try to get rid of this entirely, delay it as much as possible till the election comes, and obviously they're going to throw as much mud to her as possible. But in terms of the sort of Catholic questioning, people don't really understand that America is, for all of its history, a very, very, not just white, not just Catholic, a Protestant, specifically Protestant country. And that's actually a reason there's quite a lot of Germans in America, because Germans are also Protestant. And I'm pretty sure only JFK was the first one that sort of, was the first Catholic president in America. So of course they're going to try and dig up as much stuff as possible. But I really don't think it will influence any sort of election, any sort of, actual decision-making whatsoever. It's similar to Trump's impeachment and stuff. It's just something extra to throw up. And especially the Democrats now complaining that, oh my God, they're, getting a Supreme Court like 2 months before the election. They can't do that. Well, of course they can. But at the same time, it sounds bad for Republicans to do that. It sounds dirty. So anything that sounds dirty, anything that sounds bad, anything the Democrats can use, they'll use.
Yeah, very good point there. I even heard a statement from Joe Biden saying what they were doing, pushing through this was unconstitutional, which is just a plain lie. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that they can't do this. The president does not stop being the president just because an election is close. And I've just found it really strange. There are a whole line of thinking of this, especially, it's looking like if Biden wins, that they will attempt to pack the court, and that would mean a constitutional change. If anything is unconstitutional, that kind of attempt, I think, is much more unconstitutional, to increase the numbers and pack the court their way, than actually just putting through a judge in a time when it's completely allowed. So it's very, very strange. But Anjali, you and your fellow coordinator, Theodora, wrote an article addressing the double standards of modern feminism when it comes to, how conservative or libertarian or classical liberal females are treated in comparison to progressive women. One of the crueler topics, I think, in the media and even in this hearing was surrounding the 2 adopted children of Amy Barrett, where they're both from Haitian descent, and she was accused of being a white colonist who adopted these 2 children and using them as a prop for an anti-racist stance. These attacks just seem completely out of line to me, and I don't believe personally that they would ever dare to be used against a progressive judge entering the court. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think the first part of your question is basically how conservative women are being targeted because they disprove the lies about women and modern feminism that are perpetuated by the left. For example, Amy Coney Barrett's very existence repudiates the left's sort of binary thinking about womanhood, or that women have to deny what makes them different from men to achieve their goals professionally. And that's why the left dislike her and she's being attacked in such ways. In the article that me and Theodora wrote together, we talked about how it's a great shame of modern feminism that it's become an ideology of collectivism, which rejects diversity of thought. If we look at third wave feminism, for example, it demands that women be treated with respect and their ideas be based on merit rather than gender. However, it seems this rule only really applies when those women in question adhere to sort of progressive ideological standards. And when these left-leaning ideological standards are dominating public discourse, as we can see very much in both the US and Australia, conservative women have their views reduced to gender. So in the case of women who are attacking Amy Coney Barrett, for example, or women who subscribe to feminism, they actually should be applauding Justice Barrett for her ability to have balanced a highly successful career and a family. And she should be an inspiration to many young women because she demonstrates that women can lead exceptional careers. They can cultivate large families. They can remain dedicated to their communities and their faith and be a conservative. And she challenges the notion of by the left that women are held back by their careers or by children, or that they must repress their fertility to succeed, which is in complete opposition to what her predecessor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, said because Ruth herself viewed abortion rights as central to gender equality. So to sort of end off, I think this attack on her that she's a white colonizer and she's using her children as props is really a distraction, and it's incredibly unfair. I think the reality is that the left is the ones attempting to use her children for political reasons, and Amy Coney Barrett should be, I think, applauded for all of the great things she's going to do as the next justice.
Yeah, really, really good points there, Anjali. But talking about, badass conservative women, moving on to our next topic, on the 9th of October, Peter Credlin attended Premier Andrew's daily press conference with questions about how he approached the pandemic, and also some very pressing questions about some phone records. Anjali, could you just give us a brief outline of what happened?
Absolutely. So Peter Credlin essentially took the Premier to task by grilling him over the phone records that have been out of reach in the coronavirus hotel quarantine inquiry. One of the issues she raised was the effectiveness of that actual inquiry because it was being hampered by the lack of access to these phone records, which could actually explain who provided security guards or were in charge of the security guards who were quarantining guests at the hotel. And Peter also asked questions about the evidence of various public servants and why the Premier's chief of staff hadn't actually provided any evidence or a statement in the inquiry. And it became quite big news because Dan Andrews essentially dodged questions about whether his evidence in the hotel quarantine inquiry was at odds with phone records, and he played down suggestions that the hotel quarantine inquiry didn't have the sufficient powers to complete its work. So I think that it really brought home this idea that the press conference was really revealing those deep and serious gaps in the inquiry, the failure to get to the truth, and the fact that the Dan Andrews government has been incompetent because they did set up this inquiry to get to the truth, and yet he's doing very little to assist with it.
Yeah, thank you for outlining that. And to look at those phone records, Peter Credlin was really kind of honing in on a particular 6-minute window where they didn't have the phone records from either Daniel Andrews or his chief of staff. And that's where they believe that the answer is to who made the decision as to using private security guards over ADF or the police force. The line from Daniel Andrews right now is the reason that they use private security is because of a collective assumption, as in everyone in his cabinet and himself just assumed that's what they were doing. I've worked for parliamentarians, and I know, Connor, you currently do. I think we can agree that that never happens, this kind of assumption that something's going to be had rather than a clear answer and what is actually going to happen. Boris, do you think that Daniel Andrews owes the people accuracy and transparency, especially on something as important as this, which cost, over 700 Victorians their lives, arguably?
I mean, I hope it was a guess, guys. I really do, because it's just bloody embarrassing if it wasn't. And this whole situation, I really don't think it matters how they stuffed up. The fact is that the government just fundamentally, whatever they do, whatever they get their paws on, it's just laced with incompetence. The reason you get into government is because you can't make it in the free market. It's Hollywood for ugly people. No, what is it? Yeah, Hollywood for ugly people, basically, the government. So anyway, long story short, I think it's ridiculous that people are putting so much faith in the government still. To this day, I see constantly posts on Facebook like, don't bully Daniel Andrews, get 2,000 support, to stop bullying him. I mean, it's crazy. People should fully poke holes in the government, which is great what Peta Credlin did. But it's concerning that no matter how long Victoria keeps going through this, people still seem steadfast in supporting their beloved El Premier. And I mean, yeah, they can show that, they stuffed up with the hotel quarantines and stuff with, what's the other one? The restrictions where you can't leave the house between certain times. What was that called?
Lockdown.
Lockdown.
You're so in the Vietnam bubble that you just don't know what's going on here.
There's trucks and everything bustling, and I still think in the back of my mind, hang on, all my friends and family are in lockdown in Victoria right now. They can't leave their house. It's crazy. You forget after 6 or 7 months of this. But yeah, I'm kind of horrified that people are still sticking by the government, saying 1 more week. It's only 1 more. It's only 2 weeks of quarantine. Don't worry, guys. And we're on 6 months later. So yeah, good on people for poking holes, but I think there needs to be bigger action if they actually want to get out of this mess.
Yeah, I do agree there. And Mitchell, what are your thoughts on this whole inquiry process that was, pretty much set up by Andrews, and that it takes someone like Peta Credlin to really ask the important questions?
I mean, Peta should be commended for her commitment to actual journalism. It's a bit of a rarity these days, and it's fantastic to see. It's also wonderful to be a Queenslander. I mean, we've got our own issues up here, but at least it's not as bad as what everyone in Victoria is facing. But I do sense a changing of the winds against Dictator Dan. I think his back is really pressed up against the wall here for the first time in a long time, perhaps ever. And he absolutely owes accuracy and transparency, and he appears to be delivering neither at the moment to the Victorian people. And it's going to be an uphill battle for him to recover from here, I suspect.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And Connor, I was just, first I'd like you to touch on your thoughts on Andrew's line that this was kind of a group assumption decision and no one actually made the decision. And secondly, considering all the other people in the heads of department have given statements, do you think that the inquiry should really push for a statement and the phone records of the Chief of Staff of Daniel Andrews?
Yeah, very briefly on the first point, I agree with you. When I heard that and when I read that, I was very surprised to hear that they've just assumed that they'd be using private security. A detail like that most likely would have been discussed rather than just assumed. And it goes hand in hand with the fact that a lot of Daniel Andrews and his associates have suffered a lot of memory loss recently too. So there's a lot of pieces that aren't quite fitting together. With the second point, and it goes hand in hand with the first two actually, is I think it's quite ironic that Andrews is really pushing this line that he's being completely transparent. Evidently, one of the central questions is that it's who advised Police Commissioner Graham Ashton that private security would be used. And realistically, there's only a small group of people that could have credibly delivered that information to Ashton. And someone like Daniel Andrews, Chief of Staff, is in that group. And if she possesses information relevant to answering that question, she should come forward. Andrews' retort would be what he said to Credlin, which is that the inquiry simply hasn't requested for his chief of staff to do so, and so therefore she shouldn't. But it goes back to that initial point of, well, if Daniel Andrews really wants to be open and transparent, then he probably should have volunteered his chief of staff to go forward and make that statement. As we discussed, it took police submissions and Peter Credlin for Andrews to commit to handing over key pieces of information like phone records. If Andrews really wants to be completely transparent, it would make sense that he would volunteer this information to the inquiry.
Yeah, I think you're really right there. There's been absolutely a very much a lack of transparency, and it seems very odd for Andrews to kind of pride himself on the transparency of this process. But Anjali, apart from the inquiry itself not really asking the right questions, I do find it really intriguing that it took Peter Credlin to enter the press gallery for these questions to be asked. Why do you think other journalists aren't asking these questions? It just seems baffling to me.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think a lot of right-leaning reporters have come under attack in Victoria, or they've been denigrated in social media or faced torrid personal abuse about, to the extent that they've been impacted and they've been impeded in asking these critical questions. Whereas on the other hand, Peter Credlin is sort of one of a kind. She, spent many years on the front lines of politics and the battlegrounds of the cabinet as a very formidable chief of staff, which has allowed her to really develop that sense of resilience, develop a thick skin. And given the fact that the political environment can be volatile and there's a lot of bullying and pushing around, she's had a lot of experience, and I guess is become quite adept at asking those hard-hitting questions and not being able, to speak up when many others are, afraid of being attacked by the left media.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And kind of leading on from that, Mitchell, I find it kind of baffling that she was criticized for not being an accredited journalist. This was from many on the left side of the media. Yet her line of inquiry seems to be one of the only ones intent on discovering the truth, which should be the foundation of all proper journalistic practice. Do you think the members of this press gallery incompetent, or do you think there's a willful ignorance, or are they just kind of too much within the bubble right now? We're all in this together and don't want to kind of rock the boat.
Look, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. And Peter has, as I mentioned, done a phenomenal job here of trying to hold Andrews to account. But I think there's a general inclination on all sides of politics to suspect our political or ideological opponents, or the media, if it leans the other way to we, of being in an organised cabal, or, withholding information or not seeking out the truth. And while I think that, those coordinated attempts do play out, I'm loath to ignore the regularity with which people, particularly journalists, are merely incompetent or disinterested in deriving the truth. And, the 24/7 social media news cycle has done nothing but reinforce those issues for journalists as well.
Yeah, and Connor, what are your thoughts on the kind of incurious nature of this press gallery?
Look, all I really have to say is I agree with what Mitch was implying before, which is that I think people might realize or recognize Credlin as a journalist because, unlike most of them, she's actually asking real questions. Realistically, these lines against her sound to me like people being butthurt by the fact that Credlin made some excellent points and made Andrews look like a fool. And I think if you just take one look at her credentials, she was the former chief of staff for Tony Abbott and is a trained lawyer. And evidently, she has done a very, very good job at asking questions to Daniel Andrews. And all I have to say is thank goodness for journalists like her.
Yeah, I have to agree there. If there was ever a Yas Queen moment, I think watching that line of questioning for Peter Credlin, I was just like, Yas Queen. She was absolutely amazing. But now I'm just going to plug a little thing coming up for Generation Liberty and for all people listening. Tomorrow, actually today, by the time this is released, because we will be releasing this on Friday. So at 6 p.m. today, there will be a debate between a socialist alternative and Generation Liberty, capitalism versus socialism debate. These debates have been a little bit of a tradition, a little bit of a rite of passage for Generation Liberty coordinators and members alike. Representing Generation Liberty, we have Viral Banter regulars, Pumica and Luca. So make sure you are watching that.
The socialist alternative believe that centralised power and government ownership of the means of production is a viable system, despite all the evidence to the contrary.
Right now, we are seeing the results of a government drunk on power in Victoria. Our civil liberties are at threat, our economy is in shambles, all due to bureaucratic incompetence. Yet can you believe there are still people out there that want to give the government more power?
In a world where censorship is rife and debate is stifled, Generation Liberty is proud to engage in a debate about which system is better, capitalism or socialism.
The debate for capitalism against socialism has never been more relevant.
He would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich.
With the future uncertain due to COVID, it is essential not to miss this great debate. Tune in to see why the answer to future happiness and prosperity will always be free markets, a free society, and free individuals.
The commissar in the Soviet Union who went out to one of those state collective farms, grabbed the first worker he came to, said, "How are the crops?" "Oh," he said, "the crops never have been better, just wonderful." He said, "How about potatoes?" "Oh," he said, "Comrade Commissar, if we could put the potatoes in one pile, they would reach the foot of God." And the commissar said, "This is the Soviet Union, there is no God." He said, "That's all right, there are no potatoes."
It's sure to be a very interesting debate, and they generally do get a little bit heated. So it will definitely make for great watching. So I just thought I'd throw to you all just a little bit to see what your thoughts are, like if you're excited for the debate and if you could predict any of the arguments that you think the socialists are going to throw Pumica and Luca's way. I'll start with you, Mitchell.
I mean, they're going to trot out the same old lines as always, aren't they? They've been at this for decades and not much has changed. It's going to be that capitalism is morally bankrupt, devoid of, any sense of society or, moral good. And it's just patently false.
Yeah, I agree there. And also, if you look at their event description, they described the supporters of the IPA and Generation Liberty to be all Anglo chino wearing inbred toffs. So it's going to be very funny when they see Luca and Pumica. So they definitely do not fit that stereotype. I actually said to them that they should take that to the Human Rights Commission about them calling them inbred, because it's definitely very racist. But Anjali, what are your thoughts on the upcoming debate, and what are you looking forward to, and what do you think they will throw Luca and Pumica's way?
I'm really excited. I think it will be a very fiery debate, no doubt. I'm probably thinking that the socialists will probably raise arguments in terms of economic inequalities, exploitation of workers, repressive issues like that, as well as things like market failure. But I'm sure Pumica and Luca will do a very good job at trumping those arguments.
Yes, I think so too. And Connor, what are you looking forward to the debate? And again, what kind of things do you think will come their way?
Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to the debate. The socialist alternative these last 2 weeks have been walking around, drawing on chalk on the university campus, complaining about the recent budget, saying that the government isn't spending enough. And they've been saying that the government isn't spending enough and that it's immoral and they should be spending more. So I'll be very interested to hear if they'll have any comments tomorrow night on that, and to hear the excellent retorts against them. So definitely looking forward to tomorrow.
And Boris, you've known Luca for a while now. So if you were going to put your money on one side, what side would you put it on? And how do you think that Luca will do?
Okay, I just hope it gets fiery. I bloody hope so. Luca can really stir up the pot, and he can really go at them. And I think the bare minimum should be at least 2 30-second intervals of just yelling. unless we get that, I think it's a pointless debate because it's a clear checkmate. I can already place as much of a bet as you want, as much of money as the socialists claim to have. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it is without the crowd, because generally it's the crowd that gets really riled up, and this is going to be this is going to be online, so we'll see how that goes. And also, we do have the illustrious Gideon Roster as the chair for the debate to try and keep the socialists in check. So it's definitely going to make for some great viewing. So make sure, all listeners and Generation Liberty members, that you are paying attention to that. But now we'll move on to one of our favorite segments of the show, which is Viral Banter Battle. And this week, Connor and Anjali will be taking on the topic of Australian political history. And I'll also let you have some lifelines. So I'll give Boris to you, Connor, to help you with any one or two questions. And Mitchell, you can go with Anjali if you want to throw her some answers. So it's just your name. Just say your name for your buzzer. And we'll start now with our first question. So our first question is, which was the last Australian colony or state to become a democracy? Gonna have a guess. There's only so many states.
I have a hunch, Connor, but I mean, it's.
You want to go for it?
You said colony, which I think might have been a giveaway. Was it perhaps Papua New Guinea?
No, it's Australian. No, it's definitely within the Australian states now.
I'll have
Okay.
Anjali?
Was it Western Australia?
Correct. So yes, it was Western Australia, which is the last state to receive democracy. This is a fiery one. Which Governor General dismissed Whitlam?
Oh, Connor.
So
who went first there?
I think, Connor, you got it.
Sir John Kerr.
Correct. Okay, 1-1. Okay. Who was the only state premier to have ever been dismissed by a governor? I'll give you a tip. It was a New South Wales premier. Boris or Mitchell, do you know?
I do not.
Okay,
Sorry.
That was Jack Lang. And the next question is, how many splits has the Labor Party had since 1891? So I'll give you a little bit of a tip. It is under 10.
I was going to say, surely community count, but
I'll give points for the closest.
I'm just going to go and say 6. Very random. I don't know.
Okay. And Connor?
I'll say 9.
No. Well, Anjali, you are closer. It is 4.
Okay.
So there was the Caucus Pledge, conscription, the Great Depression, and the DLP. Okay. This one, I think, Connor, you should know this because this question has come up before, but Anjali, I think you might also know this. When did women get the vote for federal elections?
Anjali.
Anjali?
1901.
Ooh, close.
It was 1902, wasn't it? Wasn't it? It was pretty close after that, though.
Yeah, 1902. So, Connor, you get the points there. So it's 2-2. So we've got 2 more questions left. So hopefully we won't end up with a draw, or I'll have to go and find another question. In what country was Julia Gillard born?
Anjali.
Yeah.
Was it the UK?
Yeah, I'll give you that because it's Wales. So that's within the United Kingdom. 1 point. And the last question, so you need this, Connor, to tie. How many years was Robert Menzies Prime Minister, including both stints as Prime Minister?
Anjali.
Yeah, Anjali?
I'm not sure, but I'm just going to go with 13 years. I can't remember.
It's a bit longer than that. Because he was Prime Minister for it wasn't about 2-3 years the first time round. Then he got yeeted, to put it lightly. And then it was 1949 to 1972, and this is going to be quick maths. It's going to be embarrassing. What's that? It's like 25 years or so, roughly. If you include the first, I don't know. I don't remember how long he served the first time. 22 years. Yeah.
No, it's not 22 years, because remember, John Howard beat his record. So I think Anjali's actually technically closer. So you're going 22 and you're going 13. Oh, it's kind of in the middle. Damn, it's like, because it's actually 18 years that
sure.
is the total. So I think we'll just have to call that a draw. An amicable draw. But Viral Banter Battle will be returning, of course, in weeks to come, and we will be doing all the topics that our coordinators are interested in and want to battle on. But that was definitely a fun round. And for now, I would like to thank all my guests for their amazing 20-second episode, Boris, Mitchell, Connor, and Anjali. And if you are not a member of Generation Liberty yet, what are you doing? It's only $10 to join, and you will get an amazing goodie pack with books, stickers, bottle openers, worth way more than $10, and heaps of super fun new events and programs coming up that you will get first access to. So sign up now, sign up your friends, and get involved in the biggest liberty movement in Australia. So thank you all for listening. And for now, make sure that you stay safe, stay happy, stay curious, and stay free.